So thanks a lot, Alvaro. Thank you, everyone. It's a big pleasure to be here in the course of my good friend Alvaro Leart, with whom we've worked together for a number of years, and I think now it's the first time I'm a guest in his course. So that's a big pleasure. My name is Luis Buza Garcia. I have a PhD in political science from the Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen in the UK, and I teach. I'm an assistant professor at the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid for the last 4 years. I also teach at the College of Europe in Bruges, and together with Alvaro, we are among the founding members of the Open EU Debate Shaman Network. We have been working together since 2018 on a project which basically seeks to put and make bridges between academia and political and in general public debates about the European Union, and in particular about this debate on the future of Europe. And this is what I wanted to introduce to you today, which is a series of activities that we are going to be carrying out from now until May next year, precisely on the participation and deliberation opportunities that are going to be opened for European citizens on this big interinstitutional debate that is coming on in the next years. And we hope that will be an opportunity for you to cooperate with our students in Madrid, but also in Brussels and in Bucharest. So first things first, what is the Future of Europe debate? You probably have heard about the Conference on the Future of Europe, which is a project that the European Union wanted to start already this year in May. For obvious circumstances, it was postponed. It is due to start at some point next year, and it seeks to engage a 2-year interinstitutional discussion on what do we do after Brexit? What do we want to do after COVID-19 as Europeans? What still binds us together? And it does not only want to engage this interinstitutional debate, but also a citizens debate for the next 2 years. And I gave you a long quote. I won't read it in full, but basically there the Commission emphasizes the type of discourse that it has used already quite often, which is to say that when you create this type of large reflections on the future, everyone should participate on the same feed, basically. So it says it will be open to civil society, European institutions, other European bodies, regional and local authorities, other stakeholders, citizens, all of them contributing as equal partners. So basically, what the Commission is telling you, thanks to this type of venue, you may have your say just as any other head of state and government of the European Union. Now, this is something the European Union has already done in the past, in particular between 2003 and 2005 with the Constitution for the European Union, which, as you very well know, was voted down both in your country, or in the country where most of you are in, and in France in 2005. Basically, the EU is, and that's my own opinion, of course, but what it looks like for me is that the EU is trying this method another go, of course, with some adaptations, but this is coming from the past. I will come back to this on a moment. And it is also based on something that has been going on in the EU for at least 3 years now, which is the Future of Europe debate. Basically, after Brexit, the European Commission started a reflection where for the first year it opened different scenarios, which included, as I said for the first time, the possibility of deconstructing European integration in some areas. Of course, this was not necessarily the preferred outcome of the European Commission, but the very fact that the discussion was engaged was telling about the circumstances. Now, this debate evolved in 2017, as you well know. President Macron was elected in France, and he changed the tone, and he also suggested that this debate on the future of Europe should be engaged at the national level. Now, we can discuss, if you want later, what were Macron's motivation, but this changed the nature of the discussion, and it engaged national citizens consultation on the future of Europe that went on from 2017 to 2019, and there is an interesting report by the Council of the European Union on this. Now, we think that this is a first in terms of pan-European deliberation on the future of the EU. For the first time, all citizens in the European Union had the opportunity to gather and discuss at the national level what they wanted Europe to become, and we think that having these debates at the national level is particularly important. However, if you look at the reports, at what every member state did, it is very obvious that there is no common method, and the consequence of not having common methods in how you organize this type of discussions implies that it is very difficult to basically come together or to compare the conclusions from different member states, right? It's very difficult to know if the proposals coming from France, where literally more than 1,000 consultations were organized, should weight the same as the consultations coming from Hungary, where 10 citizens' assemblies were organized. And we can discuss, and I think that that's part of what we want to discuss with you, to what extent we have different methods, or to what extent we have different goals in these consultations. And I'm now taking the liberty of saying hello to Diana Tejerina, who is one of our WAM students. We took the liberty of inviting her because she is the author of the graph that you're seeing on the right-hand side of the slide, together with another of our students. And she will be probably working in the same assignment or in the same voluntary activity that we are going to propose to you. So hello, Diana, thanks for joining us. And this is also an example of what we would like to do with you if you accept to be part of this project, is to provide you with chances to publish your work with us, basically. So to come back to the content, what do we know about these figures and about these consultations? As I said, several authors have discussed whether we actually had anything like a common fora, like a common consultation at all. And one of the reasons for this is that precisely there were very big differences in the number of events between member states. There were 1,660 something events organized. I told under your control, Diana, of which 1,000 alone were organized by France. So this means that not all countries had the same emphasis and not all were equally interested in these events. So it looks like more there was a Europeanization of a national proposal, in this case by Macron. And there have been different methods. And if you want, I think Diana could tell you more about this. The consultations were very different. Now, what we want to discuss, and one of the things we'd like you to reflect about if you accept to be part of this process, is whether these differences reflect just different methods. There may be, and there are good reasons why you may want to use different methods when you organize citizens' deliberations, in relation to how you select participants, in relation to the role you give to experts, and so on, or whether what we have is actually different goals in these national consultations. And why do I say that? Because if you look at the history of participation opportunities in the European Union, what you actually find, and I think as Alvaro pointed out at the beginning, I think this is a very good connection with the course that you are having and with the work he told me you were doing last week, which is when you have institutional change, it almost never happens out of the blue. Of course, it can happen if there is a massive external shock, like COVID-19 could be, but in general, what we tend to see is gradual institutional change coming from different streams. And this is precisely what we see in relation to the transfer of ideas on deliberation in the European Union. You have one stream, which is essentially a bureaucratic, some may call it technocratic, and even you could say a neoliberal stream coming from European institutions themselves, where basically participation is justified in terms of providing better legislation, providing opportunities for improving the quality of legislation, and everyone participating in deliberation has something to contribute in terms of data, of the richness of the approach, and so on. A second stream comes more, if you want, from the local level. And this is, I think, where Macron has a role in nationalizing it, which is all this idea of bridging the gap, bringing politics closer to citizens. And as I said, that's an idea that has been applied at the local level since at least the 1990s, using participatory institutions based on the Porto Alegre methods and so on. And at some point, the European Union and Mr. Macron said, why don't we use that for European debates? The third stream is probably the most recent and is probably more inspired by the populist moment, which is politicians are doing things badly, they represent the elite, citizens should have a direct say in this. And our impression is that what we get in the end is something that a well-known political theorist, Argentinian political theorist Ernesto Laclau, called empty signifiers. Basically, there is a sort of broad consensus on the notion that participation and deliberation are important, but that does not mean that member states or institutions do agree on how to organize participation and what it actually means. But it's just the right context to hold participatory institutions. Now, my question before I tell you a bit more about the events that we're holding is, what are the consequences of that? I said already that having very different methods means that it's difficult to compare what different national citizens are demanding from the EU. Now, this is up to you to decide. You may, however, think that, of course, there are methodological differences. However, that's still an interesting event, an interesting device, and we can learn a lot about what citizens actually want from the EU. So if you look at the documents that we are proposing from the point of view of content, there's a lot to discuss on how citizens from different countries do see the European Union. The other question we wanted to emphasize is one of the consequences we think this may have is a sort of, and that would be a very European paradox. I don't know to what extent you're familiar with European law, but one of the main aspects or the main innovations in European law in recent decades is the notion of mutual recognition, right? Something which is considered wine in Spain can be sold as wine in the Netherlands, regardless of national regulation about wine in the Netherlands, right? And our question would be, to what extent is there a risk of having a mutual recognition under the participatory and deliberative label of things that are not necessarily fit in this logic? Now, what we want to propose you to do, and how we'd like you to be involved in what we're doing, is we're organizing a series of events on the role of deliberation in the future of the future of Europe debate. We are starting already next week with one debate, hopefully with the students of 4 universities, on how to translate these pan-European debates into national public spheres. We will hold a larger deliberative forum on the 26th of November, but this forum will build on what students from the 4 universities do already next week, your proposals, how you would like to be consulted. And then we are going to have a networking event in Brussels in May next year, hopefully in person. So what we start doing already this week and next week with you will be feeding into the series of events that we are coordinating. Now, to start with the beginning, the first activity is going to be, what we're inviting you is to start working in groups to review some of these national debates on Europe, and to let us know what you think in a format which we probably don't use enough in academia, and which can be on which the pandemic can be a good motivation to start reflecting, which is having videos. So basically what we'd like to do is to form groups of 2 to 4 students, either in your own institutions, or maybe with one student from another of the academic institutions of another university, to discuss 3 things. How do you assess these national consultations, what you would like to propose in terms of participatory design. So basically, you have been writing constitutions. Tell us about how you would like the Future of Europe debate to institutionalize consultation, and how do you think EU programs, from Erasmus to anything that you think the EU could do, should be used or could be used to reach out to citizens. Now, next week, it's the Erasmus Days. We are going to have an event next Thursday. We will release the videos that you produce already on Wednesday evening. And on Thursday, we are going to invite all the students contributing to this project to have a Zoom debate, to have a forum in Zoom where you debate each other's videos, and where you discuss, well, not so much the videos, but the proposals and your views. And with this debate, we will feed the next deliberative forum, where we will already organize a forum where students can deliberate with certain order and with a given agenda what you want to discuss for the future of Europe. So now, to finish, what's in there for you if you contribute? And as Alvaro has already probably told you, this is going to be entirely voluntary, but we hope you find that interesting. It's going to be a chance to work with students from at least 3 other universities, Brussels, Bucharest, and Madrid, on a topic which is going to be at the forefront of the European agenda in the next 2 years. 2, it's a chance to publish your reflections in a website which is addressing a pan-European public, and there you have seen already the work of some of our students, Diana and Alberto, who just published this paper with us. And finally, it's a chance, we'll select the videos which are more interesting and students who are more involved in the debate. And we will invite you to come with us to Brussels in May, hopefully in person, to discuss this with experts, with politicians that are going to be taking part in our networking event in Brussels. So we hope to have you in. And if Alvaro allows, we have some time for questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Luis, for the wonderful presentation. So yeah, I'm curious to hear a little bit some thoughts from you. Well, what is your take? Who is interested? Are there any questions about it that you have?
I didn't add the references there. Alvaro is probably going to send you a bit more information. We have prepared a small dossier on the entire activity, and there are a few readings there. We know we are only giving you 1 week to do this work, so we don't expect you to read a lot. But basically, there's essentially 2 things we'd like you to check: the national reports from the member states. Now, again, we don't expect you to read the 27 reports, but since you are a multinational group already, and since we are in touch with students from 4 universities, one of you could read the report from the Netherlands, the other one from the Czech Republic, and the third one, the Italian one. And that could be already a good comparison. Which do you think are the good examples? Who do you think are the laggards? Of course, some of you should probably focus essentially on or especially on the French case because of Macron's activism. The other document, which is very interesting, it's a think tank paper. It's quite short, actually. It's about 10 pages by Corina Stratulat and Paul Butcher from the European Policy Center, where they have a methodological discussion on these national consultations. And that's, I think, a good starting point. Now, I insist, I think method is important in general, method in terms of consultation. It's important for a course like this one, because that's an essential part of institutional design. How do you consult? But of course, if you are more interested on content, what you would like to discuss, which policies would you like to see the European Union carry out in the future, this is also relevant, because method here is directly connected with the outcome. Okay, according to the way in which you associate citizens, the way in which you select them, you have more or less chances that some policies are brought up, right? I mean, if you imagine that you design a policy where you fail to engage with young people, you are going to have very little in terms of the concerns of young people about environment, sustainability, about, I don't know, education, right? So method here does have a direct effect on the substance of policies.
Yeah, and this fits perfectly with most of the constitutions that you presented yesterday, in which many of you were connecting the processes in terms of elections and proportional representation, and how proportional representation can help to address issues related to climate change or other substantial issues. So here you're having an opportunity to basically say, okay, you know, how would you like to be part of the conversation in regards to the future of Europe debate? What participatory mechanisms do you deem appropriate? Which ones not?
And
so yeah,
of course, we have not explicitly said that, but we are not necessarily activists and mad activists of participation. You are also very entitled to say, we don't see the point about deliberation and participation. So this is also an invitation to do really think out of the box if you want to, and make proposals that may seem controversial. I mean, if you are a staunch supporter of representation, you may think, well, this is all very well, but is it not affecting, for instance, the legitimacy of the European Parliament or of national parliaments? Or on the contrary, if you are a full participatory, you may think, well, this goes really not very far. So, I mean, don't feel that you, of course, have to reproduce in any way any kind of political correctness in any sense. We just want to hear what you think about this type of method for engaging citizens and having discussions on policy and politics, of course.
So don't be shy. You're always very interactive and participative during the lecture. So yeah, ask questions or doubts or comments that you have on this presentation.
Yeah, I have a question, namely, how, like you mentioned that there might be groups between people from like our course or from our institution with the other participating institutions. Like, how is it, like, how is the setup for kind of connecting with the students from the other institutions? Or yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I only see your name. What your family name? What's your first name?
Svenja.
Svenja. Thanks a lot for your question. Now there we want to be realistic and also don't add any further pressure on you. So in case you prefer to start working with people only for your class, that's absolutely fantastic. Now, if you think you can already organize a group, including someone like Diana or other of our students, that's also fantastic. In any case, what we want to propose is, even if you want, you can start working already with students only from the FUA, and then on next Thursday we'll find a suitable time to have this debate between the 4 universities, and there precisely we expect that when you exchange points of view with students from the other universities, this is where we can start organizing multinational groups. But if you want to go faster, of course, we already have a list of students from Madrid and from Brussels who will be on board, so we'll just put you in touch. Now, how will you work during these coming days? We suggest you use Zoom, so we'll just give you access to Zoom or to other platforms that we may have in different institutions, and you will meet there. Now, the other big question is, how do you produce the videos? We know that you students are much more creative than us, probably, with this means. So I was a bit humbled about trying to tell you how to do a video, or you probably know that better than me. But it can be something as simple as recording a discussion between you over Zoom. If you want to be a bit more creative and go out and record something on the street, speak to people on the street and record that, of course, that can be very interesting. So we have nothing in mind in terms of the format of the videos. We just want that to be short. And also, because this is going to be screened on the Erasmus days, hopefully someone in Brussels, someone in the European institutions, in the European Commission, will watch your videos and get your name out and start thinking, oh, well, there's an interesting groups of students in Amsterdam and Madrid discussing this type of things. We need to think of these people for the conference on the future of Europe. Now, of course, I cannot promise that, but I hope at least someone notices what we are doing, and I think we are on the right spot to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Svenja. Yeah, Sani, go ahead.
very interesting, or at least it really is interesting to me. But I'm still a bit puzzled about what exactly would be the subject of the discussions already for the next week, but also for afterwards. Will it be more the focus on institutions of Europe, or also more policy issues? What exactly, what direction will we be heading for?
That's an excellent question. What we propose, but if you prefer to work in a different way, we are very happy to hear that. But what we like to discuss is first start with a review of what member states did, and essentially look at how member states consulted their populations. When I say member states, you can do both the member states, but also the pan-European consultation. The European Commission also organized the pan-European consultation. So look at how consultation was organized in the last 2 years on this broad issue of the debate on the future of Europe, and then think of how, of what do you think of this method? Was it well organized or not? Was it substantial? And how do you think it should, how the Conference on the Future of Europe should organize that? Why we propose this? Because there's still a lot of uncertainty about how the Conference on the Future of Europe is going to consult. They know for sure there is going to be consultation, but I think this is still the time to send them good practices, good ideas on how to organize it. And then what we'd like to do is have this first debate, if you want, more on method, on the procedure, how many citizens from how many countries, how should we consult them, a few ideas on organization. And then when we have that, on the 26th of November, we'd like to focus completely on policies. Precisely because when we have, and that's why we call that a deliberative forum. We want you students to discuss, debate and agree on the method. And when we have agreed on the method you'd like to use, we can apply that, and you will then follow your own rules to discuss substance. And substance can go anything from, I don't know, rule of law, how to use all these massive funds the EU is going to invest in the future, sustainability, whatever you think should affect the EU. By the way, I didn't mention that today, but even if you want to look at not exclusively EU aspects of consultation, you could do, for instance, France and Sweden are now organizing national assemblies on climate. So that could be as well another interesting forum to look at. You may want to look at what Brussels could learn of how things are organized in France or Sweden regarding climate, or what it should not learn because this is not working well, for instance. So that's what we propose. Start with method, and then we focus more on policy. But as I said, if you think that method institutions are not for you, I would be surprised because you are in a course on political institutions. But if you have learned everything about institutions and want to focus now on policy, we are glad also to include that from this moment on.
Yeah, and if I may add something, basically, this is the start of a longer term activity. So the idea is that doing this activity, you will create some sort of transnational student working groups, and we will have future activities. But ultimately, I think it might be interesting for some of you in terms of creating networks and working with other students that might also be studying different things in some ways, and developing this type of cooperation might have positive effects.
An ideal outcome of that process would be something like you create an online platform or online network, online association of students discussing the future of Europe, sort of online think tank of people who want to work together on these issues in the future, and that can be quite interesting and useful for your for the beginning of your career and for further studies and so on. So as I said, the next step is between 15th October, which is next week, and late November, when we'll have our bigger forum. We will create different working groups where you can meet from time to time with the students of the other institutions and discuss policies. And this will be sort of working groups that will feed into the larger deliberative forum. So we could imagine different working groups. One working group could work on sustainability, the other one on education, and the third one on, I don't know, rule of law. And then each of you should make proposals for the entire forum of students to, well, discuss and see how you can convince your fellow European citizens on how to organize the future of Europe. So in a sense, what we also want is to use online tools to simulate something like the Conference on the Future of Europe in terms of citizens' participation.
Okay, that helps a lot, that explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunny.
And another quick question, I think you've touched on this, but
Sure.
I'll just ask more specifically of like, how do you see these student groups and discussions in the long term, I guess, directly influencing actual policy making from the national level and European level as well?
Well, that's a good question, and if you want, that's the $1 million questions, which is how much policy influence do you get in Brussels when you organize this type of academic activities? Now, that I think we need to be realistic. I'm not sure we are going to shape the geopolitical and macro finance operations in one go from our deliberation. Now, that being said, one of the big criticisms of this type of institutions is that usually they fail to represent all age categories. So I think if you come up with a good proposal, and that's why we also thought in terms of videos, if you come with different formats, a video, if we launch a sort of, I don't know, successful hashtag, we create a podcast, or you write a good paper on this, someone in Brussels may come across it and say, well, this is not only a good idea, but there's a group of people working on that. Because usually what happens to European institutions is that they get very good information, but usually they don't know who could work on these things. So I think if they see a transnational group of students engaging this type of deliberation, at some point someone may get a call from Brussels. Now, to be more precise, we are having this event in Brussels in May. One of our partners is the Université Libre de Bruxelles. We are going to working with them in May, and there we expect to be able to invite the speaker or the chairperson appointed by the Conference on the Future of Europe to give us, to meet with us in May. So that would be a very good opportunity to sort of give him or her a message from students and from our network on what young people expect, what in terms of method and in terms of policy. So we are realistic, but we think there may be one or two chances to engage a dialogue with the real members of the conference. So that would be our sort of end goal. Thank you. It's Julian. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That clarified.
Thank you.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
I'm wondering, to what extent do you also plan on like interacting with EU politicians, or is really rather to focus on having this Future of Europe conference and
yes.
them?
Yeah, we expect to do that. We expect to do that for sure, as I said, now in the event of May. And as I said, those of you who participate in the event and who want to be part of that, we'll sort of select a few of you to come. Of course, we would like to invite everyone to Brussels. We can't, but we'll invite representatives from the different working groups to come to Brussels and discuss with the guests we will have in this event. And for sure, we are going to be in touch with some of them to already feed our proposal. So once we are ready, for instance, for this event, I said on the 26th of November, where we have our big forum, there we could, of course, plan to invite a politician. Now, which kind of politician? That's also open for discussion. We have realized in the last years that sometimes if you try to impact MEPs, they are always very interested, but they are very busy. And they usually have a very pan-European approach to debates. So at some point we wonder why not, why not consider someone like the mayor of Amsterdam or the mayor of Madrid a European politician? Because if we discuss things like sustainability, these are things that can be done at the local level, or have I don't know, for instance, a panel of national MPs. That would be excellent, because national MPs are going to be involved in the conference on the future of Europe. So there again, we have good contacts with national MPs, and maybe we could have them on the 26th of November. So if this is one of the things you would like to have, of course we can give it a go, and that's part of who we are as a network.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Other questions? I mean, one thing that maybe we can also remind, I also posted the link in one of the first lectures. We also did like a series of podcasts with European politicians and with members of NGOs, of trade unions, and we discussed a number of concrete topics. And we might consider eventually of doing another series that touches, for instance, on participatory mechanisms. For especially young people, if you were to participate. So there are different ways in which if you come up with good proposals and you form some interesting transnational student working groups, well, you know, I mean, even you yourself might come up with interesting suggestions for the type of events that we can.
I take the chance to make a link between different things we have said. For instance, one of the podcasts we did during the lockdown was on a pan-European minimum income initiative. We had a guest from your sister university in Amsterdam, Sharon Boute, who is an expert on this. She has done quite a lot of research on how citizens from different member states perceive minimum income policies. Now, of course, this is very topical at times of during the pandemic, when citizens are losing their jobs and there's a lot of uncertainty. And it's an idea that has been going around. One of the main persons behind this idea in the EU is Philippe van Parijs. And this has gained momentum now again during the pandemic. So there's a European Citizens Initiative, you know, this mechanism from one of the readings, which is precisely trying to gather signatures on this. So this is just a good example of an issue that you may, I don't know if you're interested in that, but if you are, it could be the type of policy you may want to discuss and consider to what extent the Conference on the Future of Europe should or could take that into account. Now, why I say that? Because this is the type of issue where you are likely also to have very different debates across Europe. This minimum guaranteed income may mean one thing in Finland, a second in Germany, and a totally different one in Greece or Spain. So this is precisely a type of policy where deliberation is very useful to engage a debate and try to bring understandings closer, or if you don't bring them closer, at least where you settle and you understand the differences between the different countries and the different ways of understanding a given policy. So just to give you an example, I'm sure if you could think of other things that are going to be relevant during the pandemic, for instance, climate change. I'm sure the debate on climate change in the Netherlands, which is a very flat country, very near the sea, is not the same one as Spain, which is very high above the sea, for instance. I know that's a stupid reference, but just to give you an example, and again across generations and so on. So that's just the kind of thing you may also want to do. Look around what is going on in real terms, what new policies are up there and are not sufficiently considered by EU institutions, by politicians in general, and how do you think you could use this type of participatory venue, you or other political actors could use these participatory venues to bring up the new ideas and the new needs which are coming up during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's great. Other questions?
I'll share with you the link for this European Citizens Initiative in the chat.
Some of you have already emailed me saying that you might be interested. I mean, you can, if you're interested, you can maybe just send a message here in the chat, or just send me another email, and I would compile a list of students that are interested, and then I will contact you with suggestions about how to move forward on this. But I don't know, aren't there any other questions about? Or comments, or maybe you think this is a terrible idea and we should, you know.
I do have one last practical question. What sort of workload do you expect from students for this project?
Now, we know this is entirely voluntary, so I would say first as much as you want, because we are not going to be grading you, and I think Alvaro is not going to be grading you on this either. No, we wanted that to be voluntary for you also when you work with students from the different institutions, so that there's no different pressure. Now, we're also realistic. We are asking you something for next week. So we don't, as I said, we don't expect you to read everything for next week. What we'd like you to do is to be active for a number of weeks. So we don't want you to think that you need to do everything for next week and that this is it. We like next week event just to be a starter. That's your chance to present the video, and maybe in 1 week time, your video is just going to be a record of a conversation in Zoom, for instance. Now, I don't know, in 1 month time, maybe you have time to think of something more sophisticated that you'd like to produce, or you want to write something with students from the other institutions and so on. So I would say relatively light, based on what you have already done. So for instance, this course is on political institutions, or students in Madrid are from a course called Theories of Democracy. So you may be more focused on methods, institutional design, and so on, or students in Madrid may rather want to discuss how do deliberation and representation mix together and so on. So we don't want to add, I mean, of course, this is extra, but we don't want you to do a lot of extra things. We want essentially you to build on what you already know, on what you are currently studying, and just follow what is going on in relation to the conference on the future of Europe. So now I would not necessarily be able to give you a number of VCTS or a number of hours, but we certainly don't want you to spend more than, I don't know, 10 hours for the entire semester, and that's probably already quite a lot. Of course, if you want to do more, we will be delighted, but I think that if you work in groups and you are efficient in group work, you can produce a lot of interesting ideas.
Okay, thank you for this indication.
And I mean, this exercise is in many ways a little bit what we have tried as well to develop in this course, which is not that much to me just providing you information and telling you about the theories, but also trying to critically reflect on the theoretical concepts, but also in terms of how are they applied to concrete cases. And we've discussed a lot of cases, and this might be an interesting exercise as well, just to put into practice some of the things that you might have learned. So yeah, I think Julian, you had a question.
Yeah, and nice. It kind of builds on this, and I'm not sure if it's a bit misguided and something to figure out within the working groups, but I'm interested on your thoughts on this in terms of like the fact that this is supposed to be kind of designing a citizens assembly and kind of a bottom-up approach. How do you guys see the design, like to make it accessible, like in the terms of the language that we're using? Because right now it seems like a very academic space, and if it's truly to be a citizens assembly, how do you see it being designed to ensure that everyone kind of has a platform to speak their views?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent comment, and it's a criticism I do take. You do have a fully a point. Now, just to be precise on how we see it, what we want is to use academic knowledge, basically the courses you have, the things we are researching on, and so on, to put that at the service of a political discussion. So now we don't see ourselves sort of replacing whatever the EU or the member states are going to do in terms of organizing the citizens' assembly. We are going to sort of be playing in the academic environment. What we try and do is attract citizens in general, attract politicians, attract political actors to our terrain and say there's something fruitful to be gained from these conversations. Now, we are not going to try to do the citizens' assemblies ourselves. What we are going to try and do is tell decision makers and discuss with decision makers, this is what we think we could discuss in terms of processes, in terms of methods, in terms of policy input. But of course, in the end, still the Dutch government or the Dutch parliament or the European Parliament is the one which needs to organize the assembly. So this is where we see our contribution. As you said, it's bottom up, but we don't sort of see ourselves replacing the process. What we want to say, maybe we could contribute with this input, and we have a good practice, and we also have these young people. But we do know we are essentially engaging young people in a relatively academic environment. You should also, and we should, and we need to discuss that in further events, how we would include senior people, how do we reach people who have fewer studies than you, and so on. So we are aware of that. We essentially want to start, we call that mediation between different forms of knowledge. There's political knowledge, there's very practical knowledge on deliberation, very, if you want, activist focused. We don't intend to be this type of participatory activists. We just want these people to sit at the table, at the same table, because usually all these forms of knowledge are very elaborate, but you usually don't have the meeting. So we want the activists, the politicians, and the academics / students meet together and exchange a few good practices. This is essentially how we see our role.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess it can also be discussed kind of in that space, like a recommendation of how these forums can participate. So no, that's an interesting answer. So thanks.
So we are aware of our own bias, just to put it in this way. We know this cannot be representative of the European population, but we think we may have something to say in terms of, well, good practices. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, and even if there is a certain bias towards highly educated students like you that speak English and so on, at the same time, there is also an opportunity to you yourself think on how to connect these transnational student working groups with, you know, other students that are working in more nationally oriented programs. So there are ways of thinking precisely about how to bridge the national conversations with a more transnational perspective. Okay, other questions or comments? No?
Well, thanks, Alvaro. Thank you, everyone, for having me. Oh, sorry, there was a question?
Sorry, I think Diana wants to speak.
Yeah.
Hi, Diana.
Hello, thank you. Just a short question. I'm not sure, like when we are starting with the debate, if we just must focus on how we would like to be consulted, or maybe we can go a little bit more like a critic with the role of the civil society, and maybe we can like produce more comment of how to get more close to the institutions or something like that, or just the way consultations are made. And it's like the difference between a debate where it's highlighted the role of experts, or the one that it's more implementing the citizens' participation, but in a more real way. Yes.
Thanks a lot, Diana, for joining us. Diana is the UAM student who wrote with a colleague this interesting analysis already of the paper. The answer is yes. You can essentially do whatever you want, and this is also part of this being a really voluntary activity. What we suggest and what we'd like to see in the videos, but that's of course just a suggestion, is essentially two things. One where you reflect, and in a very critical manner, if you want, on how consultations on European issues are organized, and that could be the consultations organized by the member states last year, but it could also be these consultations on subjects important for the EU, but not officially related to EU things, like I said, the climate change assemblies in France and in Sweden, or for instance, the Constitutional Assembly in Ireland, which was very important for women's rights, for instance. Just tell us, how do you think this fashion about deliberation is functioning? Do you think it's a useful method or not? And then what we'd like also to hear from you is, what do you expect? And in this, what do you expect? Really, again, you can choose to do what you want. You can tell us a sort of abstract idea on how to organize consultation. You could also tell us What do you expect in terms of linkage between policies and substance? What do you expect in terms of the outcome, for instance, of the conference on the future of Europe? What would you like to see as an outcome from this conference? Do you expect a more democratic Europe? Do you expect a more social Europe? Do you just expect a Europe that you can understand? So really, it's very much up to you. What we like is you to make this connection between the how things are organized in consultation and the outcomes, and then in the next event we will start discussing policies.
Okay, thank you, Luis.
Very welcome, and hope to see you soon, Diana.
Yeah, let's work on it.
That's it.
Thanks a lot, Diana, and thanks for the suggestion. So one last opportunity to ask some question to Luis. Is there someone that wants to ask a last question, or is it everything is clear? Okay, so if no one has a question, we will we'll finish this part here. So thanks so much, Luis, for joining us for this lecture.
Thanks for inviting me, Alvaro, and thank you all for your interest. Hope to see some of you in the coming days. And if in the meanwhile you come across any other question, Alvaro can contact Alvaro, who is also a member of this initiative, of course, and me, Alvaro, will give you my email, or to just Google me and find my email easily. Thanks a lot, and have a nice end of the course. Nice to meet you.
Thanks a lot, Luis.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego, ciao. Okay, so it's 2:25. Let's have a 5-minute break, and then we'll start at